Stani Kulechov, welcome to Mint. How are you doing, my friend? Thanks for being on.
Very, very good. I can't remember when we last time actually did this.
Last time we did this, I was working at Draper Goren Home and we were on blockchain and booze. And I think it was during the DeFi madness. And you were the only person or one of the few people that I reached out to talk about their protocol and their application that actually answered me and was able to put a face behind their project. So I'll never forget that. And you were super early on in my creator journey. So I'm really excited to be kind of doing this episode with you and figuring out what are you working on now? What is Lens? And all the good stuff. So I don't think you need an introduction. I think the crypto community knows who you are, but I think a good place to start because I wanna focus this conversation around Web3 social. Okay, I'm curious to hear your perspective. Let's just set the tone. How are you seeing the current Web3 social landscape, and any interesting applications, trends, or just anything in general to kind of give the listener idea of what's happening in Web3 social right now?
Yeah, I think we were very actually extremely early on Web3 social. So the applications we've seen and even the protocols are pretty much trying to solve like one of the earliest problems in the Web3 social space. Things like how do you create a profile that belongs to you and have portability between one application to another, and you have the true ownership of that profile, or how do you connect between different peers and how you can like maintain that connectivity with the peers, and also like how do you actually distribute content across Web3 social landscape. So there's multiple different things that the early protocols and applications are trying to solve. And I think like a lot of things are deriving from the idea of that we've been feeding and building this Web2 social where, previously it was very difficult to actually create and distribute content across the globe, across the internet. And what the bigger social media companies actually did is they provided a platform for users, any user, to actually create content and then connect with their peers on areas that might be interesting to them. Now we're more in a phase of hey, we actually can do this in a more decentralized fashion. So what we can actually recreate, and let's try to recreate, the Instagrams of the world and the
Mm.
Twitters of the world, and like basically re-architecturing the current ecosystem. And I don't know if that's the right way to do it. Like, should we actually try to decentralize something like Twitter, or should we actually try to find new ways and new applications and use cases that enables because of the Web3 aspect?
Yeah. I think one of the more interesting things that I'm seeing on the Web3 social front is how creators build audiences and monetize audiences in Web3. And before we sort of go into the different tactics and strategies that maybe you're seeing, I still want to kind of like unveil the problem that Web2 social kind of like failed at, right? And how Web3 social aims to fix that. Can you shed more light on that topic?
Well, the way I see what's not working in the Web2 social space is that you, as a creator, you build this magnificent, exciting audience around yourself, for example, but you usually build that in a specific platform. So, for example, many of us who are very active in the crypto space, we tend to build our audiences in Twitter, and we call it actually crypto Twitter because all of our networking is there. But there are many creators that have audiences, for example, in Instagram, based on what they create and what kind of content they're actually creating, or it might be TikTok as well, or any other platform. Actually, it can be even not that social. For example, Spotify, where you have distribution and you have audience. So basically, what happens is that the creators there generated this massive amount of user-generated content and feeding the content liquidity into the platforms. And end of the day, it's the platforms that are actually benefiting from that content. and various data points that the users are generated by liking different kinds of posts, sharing them, or just spending time watching one particular video. So effectively, all the monetization actually happens within the platform in a way where it's the platform that is taking all or most of the proceeds. And this is, for example, is happening with TikTok. Twitter is a good example where you might be sharing a lot of content to your audience. You're creating everyday new content, but it's actually the platform behind that is getting all the monetization, and you're kind of like you're benefiting to growing your audience, but you really don't have the portability of the audience or actually direct way to monetize.
Yeah. I think with all the Elon Musk, Twitter, Jack Dorsey feud that's happening online, now there's like that whole court trial. One, I'm curious to get your opinion on the whole acquisition take and what may happen over there. But two, what's even more interesting is all these conversations that are surfacing between Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk, and how Jack Dorsey was like, I wish Twitter was a protocol, right, in a decentralized fashion. And sort of alludes to maybe what the vision that you have for Web3 social is kind of like coming and building towards, right? Am I getting that correctly, or what do you think about the entire situation?
Yeah, I guess like what's been happening there is that there's definitely value creating a more decentralized networking and way to share content, and also a more decentralized way of preserving your identity. So I guess like
Sure.
what's has been challenging for Twitter is that in many of these platforms is that the way they're being built is that they're actually extracting value from the users and from the creators, and that value goes to the shareholders. Now, in protocols, the idea is that a protocol is just a way of connecting with peers and preserving some of the values. And what Web3 is doing with protocols also is giving the ownership of those protocols to the users and letting the communities to steer how those protocols will be improved in the future. And to be honest, like I definitely agree that Twitter could work pretty well as a open protocol. It will mean that anyone can actually innovate and compute with the data. But also having something like a on-chain profile would mean that you could actually have the ownership of the audience you create and your self-expression, and no one can actually take that away from you. So giving those rights to the users brings a lot of benefits. And I think why it's valuable discussion now is that we spent for the past couple of, or actually a few years, building this very fascinating financial infrastructure on top of the Web3 ecosystem. And now with the NFTs and creator economy, we're actually seeing a lot of power and opportunity to actually empowering creators and empowering the actual users of social media. And I think that's why it becomes even more the discussion is taking place now than ever before.
Yeah. So I think that's actually a perfect segue to giving like a more formal introduction to what Lens Protocol is, because you talked about empowering the user, empowering the network to own their profile, own their content, own the data. Can you introduce to someone who's maybe not familiar with Web3, for example, how would you explain Lens Protocol to them?
Yeah, so Lens Protocol, it allows you to create your profile once and retain the ownership of the profile. So you're not locked into any platform specifically. So any application that is built on top of the protocol, you as a user have the flexibility to access those applications, and you don't need to give up your follower base or profile into one particular application. So this brings sort of freedom for the users, and also it changes the dynamics because this means that anyone can actually freely build a better or a new algorithm, how you find and discover other users or content across the Lens protocol or across Web3 ecosystem in general. And also the experiences actually have to compete first time ever on your kind of like a I would say like as a user you can vote with your feed which of the experiences are most aligned towards finding maybe content that you might like more, or what values are important for you as a user, and what it actually makes those applications more of communities. So, for example, Twitter is a community, but you can't really actually affect how Twitter is built in the future besides giving feedback. But here you can actually have skin in the game and actually vote with your feed if you find an application that is actually more aligned to what your expectations are. So it changes those dynamics quite easily. So that's the kind of interesting parts that actually your profile is secured with the blockchain, but actually it's the applications that can choose how they reflect data. So you can effectively use an application that reflects the data and stores it on a decentralized file storages like IPFS, or you can choose an application that stores data in a cloud, just as a traditional social media application, but you still have the ownership of your profile. So as a protocol, it gives flexibility for the users, but also for the developers to choose how they want to build their application and how much decentralization they want to have in their own particular use case.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I remember in the beginning when Lens Protocol sort of came out, it started with this tweet of yours kind of saying, we're going to build Twitter on Ethereum, right? When Jack Dorsey came out with the whole Bitcoin should be the network of choice, or when they started integrating Bitcoin more religiously across Twitter, you sort of had this epiphany, like, we need to build Twitter on Ethereum, right? And I remember initially one of the sort of features that stood out to me the most as a creator was the ability to collect something, right? And of course, like in Web3, collecting and supporting a creator is like it's second nature. But the way you've sort of orchestrated is that I can collect a post, for example, on Lenster, right? And I remember in the beginning, I was skeptical about it until I actually got on the platform and saw the power of being able to collect something. And it got me really rethinking of the entire model of building an audience in Web3. And in Web2, you sort of have these subscribes, you have these follows, but in Web3, you collect and show your level of patronage, you show your level of contribution by sort of proving you were there by having something in your wallet, right? And that entire shift sort of changed the way how I think about building an audience, because I use a lot of Web2 to sort of build virality and distribution, but I use Web3 to capture that value. And now on Lenser, across Lens Protocol, all these cool applications are popping up where I can actually do both now. I can build an audience and capture that value in Web3, which I think is super unique to Lenster. Can you talk more about sort of building out that initial product flow, that initial experience for users to have that Web3 feel of a social network?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you create your profile and you have the ownership, also whoever follows you, you basically have that relationship between you and your audience. So you can actually move from one application to another, and you don't lose that audience, which is very valuable for the creators. But what that audience does for you is that you actually have a direct way to distribute content to your peers, regardless of the applications built on top. So the applications itself are effectively tailoring the user experience, curating what data users should see and how they should discover new content. But as a creator, from creator's perspective, effectively, like, collect is what the founder of from Mirror actually wrote pretty well. The collect is the new like. So effectively,
Exactly.
you just don't like, but you actually like with skin in the game, which means that you can do a contribution, and in return you get a user generated content that is actually an asset, and creating user generated content as an asset class as well. And as a concept, it's not really that novel, because we already have this idea of being able to share digital art across your own community in form of NFTs, and in return you get, as a user, you make a contribution as a fan and get in return the asset, and you're part of that community. And I think the same thing is happening in music NFTs, and also it resembles me quite a lot, my spare hobby, where I collect vinyls. So I go to different record shops and I buy vinyls because I like the feeling of
Oh, cool.
having a physical piece as music, and at the same time having like an utility and hearing uh, the audio as well. And I think kind of like taking that concept even further and thinking that actually when we are paying for music, are we actually paying for listening, or are we paying for distribution, or are we actually paying to support the artist to actually create more in the future? And this is where the kind of like a radical mind change happens, where we have to think about like, is the way we created IP anymore something that is reflecting what we think about culture, art, content in general, and should we actually go directly to a model where we actually contribute to the creator by basically buying digital content and have that provenance as well. And I think that's something that we bake into the Lens protocol in a way that all the content, if you choose so, can be collectible as NFTs, meaning that actually it's the market and the users and the followers that can actually benchmark and decide what content is valuable based on how they collect. And you can also charge for the collection or have it
Mhm.
as free NFTs. But the main point is that when we look at also like content tokenization, we've seen previously examples where the Dodge meme was tokenized as an NFT, the Nyan Cat as well, and the other one was sold for $4 million. So you've seen retroactive tokenization of user-generated content and memes specifically in this case. Why not actually bringing that model into the spot where the actual content is created and letting actually the early adopters of that content and early fans to decide how valuable or culturally relevant the content is, and creating that value loop into that content.
One thing I didn't know about you is that you collect vinyls. I think that's pretty cool. How many vinyls have you collected to date? Do you have a number?
I don't have that many. I think I have roughly, I think I have a couple of hundreds,
Okay, not
150 or
that many.
so,
I mean,
probably even
that's
more.
quite a bit. That's quite a bit. So wait, on that tangent, okay, on the collecting vinyl tangent, there's this music collector. His name is Spins 808. I've never met someone that loves music more than him. He's a big music NFT collector, and he wrote this really fascinating blog post, sort of reflecting on his experience collecting a vinyl to then collecting a music NFT. Because we're already on the subject, what do you think on the entire like music NFT trend that's happening with all these artists kind of like breaking steam, finding creative liberation through their music? What do you think about all that?
I think there's a lot of value in that because I just see there's like a lot of layers at the moment that has been built in the music industry. And many of the monetization layers are based on the copyright, intellectual property, which has been working to some extent quite well up to this date. So you can guarantee that musicians, when they create content, they can be rewarded afterwards as the content is consumed. But at the same time, IP has its own challenges. And I think because of the fact that you can actually verify who is the creator of the content and owner, you can create more interesting parallel economies and monetization models that are based on the on-chain aspect of content. So, for example, that if I know that there is a very good artist that is playing very good music and creating very good music, I should be able to support it directly and have that contribution on chain. And because I have that contribution on chain and I have that digital asset, that creates me more accessibility to other kinds of things. But also, I'm more of a believer of this idea of on-chain kind of like commercial property rights. So I
Okay.
think that you could actually create content and revoke all rights to that content in terms of intellectual property, and at the same time, you can create different kinds of on-chain commercial rights. For example, if you want to use my piece of content, uh, let's say that I create a nice drum kit and into your song, you can actually split fees that you collect between us together. So it's more of kind of like a altruistic model, and you're actually kind of like attributing to other creators. But I just feel that that might be the more aligned model in an open source economy, and how we can actually build better monetization models compared to IP and the restrictions that they're bringing. Because effectively, what IP is doing, and I'm talking from also my lawyer hat, as you, Adam, know that I'm also a lawyer in my background. So basically, that's you are limiting the innovation and creativity with IP. But in an ideal world, you don't want to limit creativity, and actually you want to get creativity and innovation to thrive. And I think that's what open source as software has been doing for a long time now. And I think we have to somehow transit that into all the kind of like a more creative industries as well.
Yeah, makes sense. On that thought of monetization, how do creators make money on Lens? What does that look like?
Well, in the protocol itself, we baked a couple of interesting ways to monetize. One direct way to monetize is allowing the users to collect the content as NFTs. So effectively, you're um, buying a digital asset as NFT from the user-generated content from the creator. But at the same time, you can also, if you have a bigger audience, you can mirror someone else's content to your audience. And if someone collects that paid content, you can actually get mirroring fees yourself. So there's the idea of monetization of actually directly from the users, but also the curators can get monetization by sharing the content to their own audiences. And these are just two models that we have baked into the protocol, but factually you can build more into that. So you can build your own ways to monetize. You can still create some sort of a transparent, promoted advertising as well. And this is something that someone is actually building on top of the Aave protocol, or you can sell some sort of visualizations as well. So like the protocol itself is flexible on what you want to use in your application. It's more of like a business decision, what you have to do by yourself or with your community.
My favorite feature at the moment with Lens Protocol and just sort of how I've seen people use it on Lenster is the mirror feature. I think it's one of the coolest things that creators can tap into as a way to incentivize virality, right? Incentivize collaboration and sort of like reward. So the way it works that I've seen is like, let's say you post a piece of art, right? And you can set this rule where every time somebody reshares it and mirrors it, they can basically earn 10% on that, right?
Yeah.
And it really aligns incentives, and it's a cool way to kind of build a viral effect online. I don't know. I think it's really cool. Are there any other ways, any other tools that you think are missing from the Lens protocol, from the tool stack on Lens, that have yet to be built out? Anything you can share?
Yeah, tons. I think like we kind of built the bare minimum in terms of what you can actually do in social media. And so the way the Lens protocol itself is built, it's a smart contract based protocol. So you create the profile, then you can follow other profiles, and every profile can publish content. And the content can be reflected on chain. It can be off chain, decentralized file storage, depending on the application use case. So you kind of like choose the amount of decentralization you want to have. But what's exciting is that you have this different kinds of modules. So you have follow modules. So for example, you can create a smart contract based module which says that you pay to follow, let's say, a creator, but then if the creator collects monetization fees from the collects, those are split with the followers, kind of creating some sort of creator crowdfunding or something similar in that sense. And you can create different kinds of modules also for commenting. So one of the earliest things, because of the size of the Lens protocol, is that there's currently 80,000 profiles at the moment. And in the beginning, there was a few of the bots. So we actually started very early to experiment how we can get rid of the bots that are in the protocol. And what we created is this kind of like a module where you can comment to my post if I don't follow you, but some of my friends follows you, and you can actually set the degree up to, let's say, 6 or so. So, for
Oh,
example,
cool.
if I set the degree to 2, it means that if we have a common friend, then you can comment. If I set it to 3, that means that you can comment if we don't have a common friend, but that my friend has a friend who is friend with you. And this is based on the idea of that every single person in the planet is connected by 6 degrees of separation
Right.
of people. And it has been super effective at the moment. I think if Twitter starts to use this tomorrow, you will stop seeing those crypto spammy bots that you get all the time in your feed. So this is a smart contract based module, and I think the power on smart contract based modules and also like the composability is that you can create these rules and you can't really circumvent them because they're smart contract based computation, and anyone can actually come in and contribute to the modules.
I love that. I think that's a really, really powerful feature as a way to sort of curate quality and a new experiment to see how you can use an on-chain social graph, right, to kind of figure out connections, deviations, all these interesting things that we maybe use in real life, but now you can sort of implement digitally. I think another cool feature of the mirror element, is that one of the most direct form of monetizations that creators use today is through affiliate links, right? Whether it be their Amazon affiliate link or some type of brand that they collaborate with. So being able to embed that directly into the platform, into the protocol, I think off the get-go is really powerful. I want to also talk about user-generated content as an asset class, because essentially when you start to implement like the financialization of everything, give or take, even though there's a lot of free collect options on Lens that the user has dictation over, what does it mean to a creator sort of to create user generated content that's an asset class, and what's the potential behind that?
Yeah, I guess like it boils down to the same idea that you can create digital art as a collection and then make it available to purchase or somehow gain within the community. So the idea that NFTs are successful because it's a way for you to participate in a community and also buy a digital good, which can be digital art in most cases, with different kinds of metadata traits and so forth. The same concept is effectively extended also to content that is videos. We've seen the NBA Top Shots work in a similar way, and just any content that you produce, audio, text, and making it as easy as possible. And I think like the creators in general as a user group is interesting because even in Web2, creators aren't really that well supported. So the monetization aspect is one. So you create you as a creator, you always start from the very low level of the food chain. So you basically have to create a lot of content. You put a lot of proof of work to actually ensure that your content is something that is interesting, consumable. You have a lot of competition. You have no choice than joining a bigger platform like, let's say, TikTok, and start actually creating a lot of content and creating
Right.
follower base. And you don't have much of control what you're doing, and your only kind of like goal is to create audience into that platform and hopefully somehow direct the traffic, right? But being able to actually create the content right on spot and also having your own distribution channel, it's equals the same as walking with your own social network. So it's not just like it's like what Lens Protocol is doing is that it's giving you your own social network and your own social identity, so that you can choose like how all these applications are reflecting your content. And being able to do that, and being able to distribute your content directly to your followers without anyone can actually coming in between, uh, takes these creators and puts them into a completely new position, and also elevates the content itself, because I know that this content actually exists as an asset class, and I know that I can get directly from the user. It creates different kinds of elevation for the creator. So they actually own their own distribution and relationships with their audience, which is significantly different than we have now in Web2 social.
I think a lot of the success of Web3 social is going to be dependent on use cases of creators, kind of like seeing success through it, right? Either through building an audience, either through making money. And because we're so early in the adoption curve of Web3 social, are there any creators that come to mind that have used a decentralized social graph as a way to kind of like really push the value and push the example of what it actually means to own your audience, what it means to own your distribution funnels? Any creators come to mind?
I think in terms of like creators in Lens Protocol, like we have a smaller music creators that come and actually drop content. There's also like that are doing it on a daily basis. There's also creators, for example, like the Pussy Riot, that came and did a
Right.
significant drops within the Lens Protocol, effectively fundraising directly to their causes. And I think that's a valuable tool, but also like I'm more excited about creators that are coming into the applications of that are built on top of the Lens Protocol and starting to create their audiences, which takes more time. The cool part is that like once you create your audience, it's yours to keep. So you aren't locking yourself into a new platform, and that's a bigger an important factor to think about, because if you start investing time into building audience into new application, and that application doesn't take off, and I remember this happening during the whole Web2 beginning, where you saw a lot of Reddit big competitors, and people were spending a lot of time there, and they didn't go anywhere. There is Slashdot is still very like it didn't
Mm-hmm.
became that big eventually. You have countless of examples. So like you're actually like your investment of time is more important, because you can actually wait that someone else creates another application that might be actually more interesting to you. And I'm looking into like into those creators that are actually building those audiences and constantly creating a narrative of what kind of content they want to produce. And from the developer's perspective and application itself, I think like my idea of like creating the decentralized Twitter was more of a troll. Like I never uh, thought about the idea that like competing against Twitter, because Twitter has a very strong social network. So effectively, because you can't port your audience, and
Right.
in Web3, you'll be able to jump from one application to another very quickly, the same way as you're swiping one TikTok video to another. So it's kind of like pointless to compete. But what you can actually do is, now that the barrier to enter and build those applications and leverage the flywheel of an existing social graph, you can actually build a new kind of experience, or curate the content in a way that it services some sort of a type of activity that is fascinating, or something new, and get that flywheel effect. And I think that's where most of the traction will come, where we are seeing something new being built, instead of recreating the old.
Right. When I think about the evolution of Web3 social in the context of crypto's history, I very much think back to 2017 to 2021 when NFTs started picking up steam, creators started issuing NFTs and building collector bases, right? And now when I think about Lens Protocol, it's like the next evolution of that to tie in that entire network together, right? Because if you're just building a collector base on Ethereum, there lacks that content distribution through Twitter. But if you're building on Lens, right, and you build a collector base on Lens, you sort of tap into the value of distribution and the value of monetization. I think one of the interesting sort of onboarding funnels that maybe you guys face is how do you port a creator's existing collector base that's already built on Ethereum, Polygon, into Lens? What does that look like? Because I know for me, I have a bunch of collectors that have collected my free NFTs, right? But not all of them have a Lens profile yet, right? How do we make that transition?
Yeah, well, currently it's easy because you can actually collect content without having, I mean, the creator can set the content creation in a way where you don't need to have a profile. So you can actually not be a Lens profile user. But over the long term, what we think is more valuable is that every user that is collecting will have a Lens profile. And effectively, what we're looking to do as a protocol developers to be as much as more unopinionated. So where the protocol could be servicing as a network, how the namespace is working, how to create your own namespace, and making a bit more flexible for the developers to build actually. And I think that what is interesting about content actually is that you can have the same content, but actually you could create different kinds of ways of letting the users to choose where they want to mint their content. So for example, I have some NFTs. Well, actually, most of my NFTs are on Ethereum. I have a big chunk of NFTs on Polygon, and then I have NFTs also on Optimism. So effectively, you could see the content in one network, but actually initiate transaction to make that content into a digital asset in another network. But also, it boils down to a bigger discussion: is where do you want to see Lens Protocol? Do you want to see it cross-chain, or do you want to see it in a one particular ecosystem? And this is something that's the community members are discussing already, how the cross-chain functionality will work and how the scalability will function. And there's also the argument of that, because there is the middleware, which is now the Lens API. Then there's other middlewares like the Graph, which is more decentralized middleware, RSS free, which is also a way to index the data. And the idea is that, well, you could actually decentralize that middleware, and you don't actually mind where the social graph is deployed, because you have all that data availability that you can capture. Because Web3 social is more about data than a state.
So on that same topic, you talked about being able to leverage your social graph across other networks. So paint me a picture of how would a user leverage their social graph outside of Lens? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because we put a lot of value into the social graph. So effectively, your social graph is the strength of your social capital. So you can actually use that if you want to distribute collaborative content to your audience directly. You have monetization opportunities, but also I see a very valuable use case in thinking of the Sybil resistance part. So for example, if you take the example of the degree separation commenting module, so for example, if we're able to get rid of the bots in the Lens protocol in the platform itself, you can actually use that as a service to basically have other Sybil resistant use cases. For example, if you have a game where anyone can participate, but you want to play with people you know or are real, or any other use case where you actually don't want bot activity, you can actually use that social graph, and you can look into, for example, who are the who for example Adam follows, who are the people that Adam follows, and their friends of friends, and from that you can actually use that social graph in Sybil resistance. And the another aspect where you can actually use it is something where you want to create also a reputation score. So the reputation score is also in that kind of like a Sybil resistant form, but also you can create a reputation score, for example, if you want to measure what is your strength of your social capital.
Got it.
That could apply into, let's say, should you be able to not just like to comment on different posts, but for example, should you get a access to a particular user group or access to a loan? So effectively taking the social graph idea and creating more accessibility for the users in a decentralized way. And because the social graph is on chain, that data is verified. So that's the key kind of like a difference. Because why do you want to have a profiles and the social connections on chain is because you can use this data, and that data is verified by the blockchain, and you can use in use cases like distributed resistance, or alternatively in something like building an on-chain reputation.
What do you think are the risks or responsibilities for a user to own their social graph, to own their distribution, to own their content? What sort of challenges or risks come with that?
I think one of the important things that you have to keep in mind is that you spend a lot of time of actually building social capital. So uh, first time ever, that social capital becomes very tangible for you, because you're not building it into an application and building the follower base in a specific database, but you're actually building to yourself. So whatever you create, you have to also secure the same way as you secure keys, for example, that you might have. And there's a lot of ways to actually make it a bit more user friendlier for the mainstream audience. This is something we're working on the Lens team itself, but also like account abstraction, where you can add something like social recovery directly to your Ethereum addresses and on-chain addresses. Is something that will help down the line. But basically, securing your keys is one of the aspects that you need to mind. So it's more of a challenge of like outside of the protocol, but how do you actually do that? And this is something we're currently working. And also, like, it's more of a user experience thing, and a lot of user experience concerns is something that we've been addressing down the line all the time. So, for example, the way you interact with one of these applications built on top of the Lens protocol. For example, if you go today and use something like Lenser or Favor or Orbit, the mobile apps, you actually post the content right away, and you don't sign anything. You don't pay any gas, because you delegate your signing power to a dispatcher, which pays your gas and signs the transaction for you. And also the UI is built optimistically, that you see the transaction, you see actually the content being posted, but the blockchain logic happening in the backend, so you can actually continue your user experience. So kind of like when we're building Web3 Social, we also have to rebuild the way we're building applications, because we're not building any more finance. We're building something where we have to meet the expectations of the users in Web2 social. And then another part which is important is that you need to build the applications in the right way. So you need to know where you want to use privacy more. For example, where you want to create transactions that are not on chain, or you can actually remove them later, and so forth, depending on the use case. And I think that's the best way to achieve is by community guidance on how to build these different applications based on their use cases.
Makes sense. I want to jump into audience questions really quick, because one of them is very relevant to what we're talking about. So this one comes from Charlie of decent.xyz. He basically asks on Twitter that there's tons of vertical specific apps competing on the front end. Are there any concerns about power users always chasing like the next coolest feature, fragmenting maybe friendly activity, and making Web3 social less fun? I guess the question is sort of like coming from the point of view of, if you have this decentralized social graphs and you have endless applications building on top of it, how do you build stickiness, right? And how do you sort of build collaboration versus competitiveness?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely something what will happen in the beginning, that you see users being super excited about, hey, there's one application and I really love to use this. And hey, there's a new application which makes the same experience that I'm used to on Lens, but now it's on mobile. And hey, this application actually finds things I like faster, and actually more in accurate way. And I think that happens a bit in Web2 social, because we're users of multiple of applications. So you might be using at the same time Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok for different reasons. Maybe TikTok because of the algorithm, and Twitter because of the kind of like maybe like a work network or the crypto
Right.
networks there. And like it's already happening. But I think like in Web3 social, what I personally believe will happen is that you start to see more of like communities form behind of those applications. So for example, that I feel Reddit has, as a Web2 platform, has accomplished it to some degree, where you're actually using Reddit because not only that content might be good for you, but also like you're excited about the values and how the moderation and other things are happening, community based in Reddit. And then you can find also the relevant content for you in those subreddits. So like you're very aligned with the community and the application community. So you will start seeing that each and every application will have a community behind of it, and they will reflect
Mm,
certain values. And this goes towards the recently what we launched with the Cultivator DAO. So Cultivator DAO effectively is just a DAO that governs trust and safety, content moderation and curation within the Lens ecosystem. But anyone can actually take that Cultivator DAO, fork it for their own kind of like a purpose, and have their own policies, and set it behind of a new or existing application. So I would say that all these applications, they become more of communities, and the reason they are not now in Web2 social is because they're more of products where the users are kind of like locked in, and you have little of choice of choosing algorithms, choosing experiences, and have a say or even have part of the monetization that is happening within the platform. And you just choose to be a spectator and consumer than actually a community member. And this is what is going to change now.
that as you're talking, my mind is absolutely racing because I'm starting to think, what sort of application can I build for my community, right? And maybe we're entering a world where all these DAOs, all these token-based communities, start having their own applications that they build out on this decentralized social graph. So now you have my mind sort of like going off on what else can I provide for my community on an application level that they might find interesting. Have you seen communities sort of build out like their own native applications that's specific for their communities on Lens? Have we gotten to that stage yet?
I actually saw like a couple of forks of Lenser. So Lenser is just a community built application. So we don't have a front end actually for the Lens protocol. They're either built by third parties or community members. And Lenser is a open source front end that anyone can actually fork. You can
Mm-hmm.
contribute directly. You can help the Lenser team to actually improve the application, and it's actually happening on an ongoing basis. And I've seen like a couple of like forks where people have created smaller communities. I think if Lancer will be something similar to Reddit in terms of like the ideas of you can create sub communities, we will see probably more of this kind of forking, and probably we will in the future. But that's very exciting because like you can actually just have the user experience that you really want, your community and your community values, and the algorithms that are most aligned with what you're building, and as a community in one particular user experience. So I think that's kind of like a valuable uh, aspect. And I think another thing that's going to be very big is the monetization. So how the protocol and the front ends. Let's even put it this way: like the monetization probably will be more on the front end sides. So how the front ends will divide the monetization between the protocol and the applications, because the applications actually they are the ones that drive distribution for the protocol. So there's a healthy feedback loop there, and then the protocol needs the application because of the distribution and utilization as well. So effectively, we probably will see some sort of forks of the existing smart contract modules where you will see
Sure.
featuring between the front end and the protocol.
That makes sense. I wanna talk more about challenges with building a social graph, let alone Lens. Um, this one also comes from the community. This one comes from Nima. How do you plan to scale to Facebook level of usage / adoption while remaining decentralized and trustless? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, on the infrastructure level, it's very much basically going into more layer twos in the sense that you can do a lot of transactioning on Polygon, but down the line, what you need to do is you have to get into a rollup where you can have a vast, bigger throughput for the transactioning. So that's on the infrastructure layer. And then on the actual middleware, what we're planning is to decentralize the middleware. So we have the Lens API, which currently is basically a way of indexing all the data on Lens Protocol and making it usable for applications that are built on top. And these applications, they're choosing either going directly to the blockchain or using Lens API or using the graph or RSS tree. So basically, there we want to create a decentralized network where network agreement of the data indexing and providing that as a service for the application. So like all that infrastructure stack isn't really that hard end of the day because there's already a way to scale. The more challenging part actually is the user experience. So how do you make the user experience accessible and something that works for billions? And when it comes to that level, you need to think of actually all the way down. How do you manage keys? How do you plan the key recovery for the users? And how do you ensure that best experience and also that the content is relevant? So I'm more kind of like thinking that the bigger heavy lifting is on the application level and also on that user experience level where you need to actually show that Web3 social is actually possible and it's actually easy to use, and you don't need to do big compromises to use something like decentralized social media. And then there's the question of like actually like how much security you need from decentralization. So something like decentralized finance, for example, you might need the Ethereum scaled security, but something where you're dealing with decentralized social. You want to have the on-chain ecosystem because you want to secure the profiles, so no one can drag you out of your profile and your follower base. But then you can actually have a scale on that, like on layer twos or even layer threes. And then obviously on the content side is that not all content necessarily need to be on chain depending on the use case. I would say something like public DAO discussion forums could be completely on a public on chain or reflected into a public accessible endpoint like IPFS. But then something that is maybe you want to keep more private can be actually reflected to a cloud instance. So you have to know what level of decentralization you will choose, and then also making the user experience easy. But the groundbreaking thing is that with Lens Protocol, you have that scale, so you can choose actually what you want to apply from the stack.
I also think as Lens sort of encounters Facebook like adoption, there's going to be pockets of sub communities that care about specific things that Lens will essentially be able to incentivize and empower to sort of take ownership around that. One of them is the Cultivator DAO that you guys sort of announced when it comes to at least content moderation, instilling trust and safety in the ecosystem. I'm curious, are there any other sub communities or users or features that may be more relevant to create like a Cultivator DAO like experience for management?
Yeah, I think like Cultivator DAO solves aims to solve mainly on the content curation aspect, but there is multiple things that you can actually think about it regarding DAOs in terms of servicing content, the content itself, but also the algorithms. So how do you rate different kinds of algorithms? What's the benefit to it? And how you can actually make it more DAO centric. So how you can actually vote within the DAO, which algorithm is actually beneficial to the users, and those kind of DAOs could be very flexible, so that you don't need to ask every single user on a application like which algorithm you want to actually consume. But also, I think like the DAO aspect is interesting because you can create various different support systems for the creators itself, customer support. So anything that really requires some sort of a human assessment, smaller DAOs are very valuable.
Makes sense. Okay, so I have two final questions for you before we head off. Okay, number one, you obviously have a deep DeFi background. I'm curious how you see the two overlapping, DeFi and Web3 social. What does that world look like?
From more of like a builder's perspective, I would say that we've always had a vision of actually building access to users. So with the Aave protocol, we were able to build access to fair and transparent financial markets that work globally. And with the Lens protocol, we're creating access to your own social ownership to your own social identity and your own social network. And I think like it's a broader kind of like idea that internet brings accessibility, but in general, that's where I basically spend my time growing up. And with Web3, we're even like reinforcing the accessibility by giving you guarantees of ownership of the properties that exist on the internet. And then the overlap is an interesting question, because this boils down to the topic of how you could use Web3 social graph in a different kind of a context. And I think that's where reputation score plays quite big of a role, because you could actually gate access. You can also gate accessibility into under collateralized loans as well, and that's where things can become very powerful. We're very far away from that idea, so I don't expect to see any decent implementations in the next couple of years. Okay. But as we start to see like how valuable on-chain verified data is from the social graph perspective, then we'll see a lot of interesting features coming up.
The last question that I have for you, Stani, is how does Lens make money? Either on a protocol level, an application level. What's your vision around that?
Yeah, the protocol itself has already coded into the smart contracts a way to collect protocol revenue. But what we're more excited about is to figure out how the front ends will actually start collecting the fees of the interactions that are happening, or the collections across the protocol, and then deciding on the fees sharing together with the protocol and the community. So end of the day, I think you could assume a feedback loop where the protocol needs the applications for distribution and adoption, and at the same time the applications need the protocol because of the functionality, but also because of the network effect that you're getting when there's multiple applications plugged into the same social network. And because of these two kind of like incentives are aligned, you will see that both the applications and the protocol, they want to actually see each other to succeed and share that revenue together. So there is definitely like to build in collection modules for the collecting content as NFTs, as monetization, and also the mirroring. But I will be excited to see additional ways to monetize and across all the applications. And I could see in the future even an interesting way where someone might originate a content on Lenser and someone else might collect it on Orb, and there's
Right.
app to app specific fee sharing, and that will be super cool.
That is really cool. Look, I'm a big fan of building a better world for creators. I think you guys are taking the right steps to do it. I'm building an audience over there. I'm actively on there. So if you're listening to this and you're on Lens, hit me up at Levy Chain. And Stani, before I let you go, where can we find you on Lens? Where can we learn more about Lenster? Shill it away.
Yeah, so you can find me on Lenser, so it's or any of the applications built on top. So my handle is stani.lens, and feel free to interact with me. And also, I assume this video will be available on the Lens Protocol too for collect. So remember to hit the collect button.
Exactly. Stani, thank you so much. We'll have to do this again soon. But till next time.
Thank you, Adam.